Okay, now for reassembly, we're going to put it back together in the opposite manner that we took it apart. So you're going to grab your trigger group housing, and you're going to use your trigger guard, and we're going to put this bent lip there. It's going to go right in there. We're just going to hook it on in there, and we're going to rock it in until it clicks, and it pretty much clicked in place, and then from there you can kind of move it out of the way. So next thing you're going to do is you're going to get your safety spring. It has two sides, a long side and a short side. The long side goes on top, and it's going to basically fit inside in that groove there. There's a post inside the trigger housing that the spring's going to hook into, and it's going to rest in that position. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have an opening there for your safety, and sometimes to make the opening as big as possible you just want to kind of rotate the trigger guard out of the way a little bit. So now the safety has this ledge here with these two positions, and those two positions are the safety on and off position, and so that's what's going to engage this long spring. And we're just going to drop it in from the top. Okay, and when you flip it over, and make sure the spring doesn't fall out of place, when you flip it over you'll be able to see the post as it clicks in to the housing. So now that's in. So now at this point what you want to do is make sure that your trigger guard is pulled back away from the safety, and you want to make sure your safety is pushed all the way forward, because at this point you can already start engaging your safety. Okay, so you want to make sure it's forward, and what that does is that brings this arm up out of the way, and you're going to need it out of the way for the hammer. Okay, now this hammer has this raised portion on the back side of it, and this raised portion here has to fit underneath in this area right here. Okay, and also this lip here, okay, it needs to be behind the hammer strut. Okay, so now that we know which orientation it needs to be in, we're going to slide our hammer in. Okay, and it's basically in place there. And now we're going to line up the hole in the trigger guard, and the hole in the housing, and the hole in the hammer itself. Okay, so we'll get those all in line together, and now we'll drop in our hammer pin. Okay, and that's engaged. Okay, flush on both sides. So at this point, this is your first real quality check. So when the trigger guard is all the way down, the hammer should be all the way back. Now if I raise from this position, if I raise my hammer, my trigger guard should follow. Okay, if it doesn't, then something's wrong. Pretty much I think it'll be stuck in the up position. If you have things put together wrong, it'll be stuck here. You won't be able to move it at all. Okay, because that means that what that means is that the strut here on the hammer is behind the lip on the trigger guard, and so you need to take it apart and fix that. Okay, so now we're time for this is the tough part, if there really is a tough part. It's just more about getting used to. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our hammer spring assembly together. You're going to put your hammer strut into the spring, and we're going to put the hammer spring in the housing. Okay, now there's two portions, a cutout area and a concealed area. So this cutout area is going to go towards the trigger housing. Okay, so it's not going to be visible. It's not going to be in your view. And the hammer plunger, I guess I've been calling it a strut, it's really a hammer plunger, sorry. So the hammer plunger is going to engage this groove here in the hammer. Okay, so we're going to push that in there. We're going to have it engage its spot there. And so from this point, you want to just kind of hold it out of the way with your thumb there. Now we're going to have the trigger, we're going to drop the trigger in. But you see this area right here on the trigger? This area is going to be our pivot point on the housing, and it's going to catch on. Let's take this out here. It's going to catch on this opening in the trigger housing. Okay, so we're going to drop it in, and it's going to sit there and rock back and forth on that point. Okay, so we'll start over. We're going to drop in our trigger plunger. I'm sorry. We're going to drop in the hammer, spring, and plunger assembly. Then we're going to drop in our trigger. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to pinch these 2 points here until the hole in the housing, the hole in the hammer spring housing, and the hole in the trigger are lined up. Okay, and once you have that point established, okay, it takes a little bit of getting used to, by the way. But once you have it, and sometimes what can happen is this will slip out. If that happens, start over. Okay, this is much harder to do while you're trying to film at the same time. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just grab it that way. There we go. And sometimes you have to remanipulate the plunger, move it down a little bit. Okay, there we go. So now you can see that I have a hole there that I can put my trigger pin in. Okay, so I finally got it in. Now at this point it's not all the way seated, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to cock the hammer, okay, and we're going to let it catch on the sear, okay. And at this point you're going to open your trigger guard, and now what we're going to do is you're going to grab your hand, you're going to grab, put your fingers over here, and then put the trigger on the palm of your hand, and we're going to rock it back and forth. And what that's going to do is allow your trigger to be pushed in. So as you do that squeezing action, you're just going to keep constant pressure on the trigger pin, and it's going to pop in. It's going to go all the way into the divot. Okay, so now it's all the way in. You can see it's all the way in on that side, and you can see it's fully engaged on this side over here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is going to lock the trigger guard, and now we're going to do a function check. Okay, so you're gonna hold your hammer with your thumb, stop it from slamming all the way forward on the housing. So you got your safety. First thing we're going to do is engage the safety. Okay, safety off, safety on. We should be able to pull the trigger and nothing happens. Now we're going to disengage the safety, captivate your hammer and pull the trigger and ease your hammer forward. Okay, so all's well so far. So now you're going to keep the trigger held back. You're going to push back on the hammer hooks, and the hammer hooks are going to engage the disconnector. Okay, another forum member coined me into the nomenclature. Thank you very much. And then once you release the trigger, once you let off the trigger, the disconnector is going to move out of the way. The hammer is going to then engage the sear. There you go. Okay, so let's see that again. Okay, so we're going to hold the trigger back, and we're going to release, and now it's held by the sear, and it's ready to fire again. And there you go. That is the disassembly, reassembly, and function check of the M14 M1A trigger group. Thanks for watching.